Most people say they're moving to Richmond, but that's usually not the real decision because once you actually get here, you realize pretty quickly Richmond can mean a lot of different things. It could mean a walkable neighborhood close to the city. It could mean a newer home in the suburbs with everything 5 minutes away. Or it could mean land, space, and total quiet just outside the inner core of the metro. And here's what I see happen all the time. People come here thinking they already know what they want. Then they spend a day or two driving around, and everything shifts. And as someone who was born and raised here, a native Richmonder, that part never surprises me because this isn't one city. It's a full metro area with different ways to live, all within 30 minutes of each other. So if you're thinking about moving to Richmond in 2026, there are a few things you really want to understand before you make that decision. One of the biggest things I walk clients through every single week is this: figuring out where the metro area actually fits their life, because most people don't struggle with whether to move here. They struggle with choosing between very different options once they realize what's available. You've got the city, you've got multiple suburban pockets, you've got smaller communities just outside of the metro, and you've got areas where you can get space and privacy without being completely disconnected. And the truth is, those choices don't just change where you live. They change your routine, your commute, your weekend, your entire experience here. So in this video, I want to walk you through what people don't always realize until after they get here, and how to think about the Richmond Metro in a way that actually helped you make the right move the first time. One thing that throws people off right away when they move here is this: the Richmond area doesn't function like one central city. It functions more like a collection of connected areas that all run a little differently. And if you don't understand that up front, your home search can get confusing fast, because what people think they're doing is picking a location, but what they're actually doing is choosing between different systems. Let me explain what I mean. You could be in one part of the metro where everything is 5 to 10 minutes away. Groceries, restaurants, shopping, daily errands, all very straightforward. Then you move to another part of the metro and things are a little more spread out. Maybe your go-to grocery store is 15 minutes away. Maybe you're driving a bit more for everyday things. And then there are areas where that spacing is intentional. You've got more land, more privacy, but you're planning your trips a little more. Same metro, totally different day-to-day logistics. And it's not just about distance. Road patterns change depending on where you are. Access to major routes can feel very different. Even how traffic flows at certain times of day can vary depending on the part of the metro you're in. So 2 homes that look similar on paper, same price point, same size, can feel completely different once you're actually living there. And this is where I see people get tripped up. They'll find a home they love online, but they haven't fully thought through how that location works for their daily routine. And as a native Richmonder, this is one of the first things I walk people through. Not just, do you like the house, but does this location actually work for your life? Because in this market, location isn't just about proximity. It's about how your day flows, how easy it is to run errands, how you get to work, how often you're in the car, how connected or disconnected you feel from everything around you. And once people start thinking about Richmond that way, their search gets a lot clearer. Once people understand that the Richmond Metro isn't just one city, the next surprise is this: the county you choose actually matters a lot. And this is something that doesn't always show up clearly when you're just browsing online, because on paper, 2 homes might look very similar. Same price range, similar size, maybe even built around the same time. But once you look a little closer, they can function very differently depending on where they're located. And what that affects is your day-to-day experience. Things like how neighborhoods are laid out, how far you are from everyday conveniences, the type of housing you'll typically find, how quickly areas are growing and developing. In some areas, everything feels very connected and built out. In others, things are a little more spaced out with a quieter pace and more room between properties. And neither is better. It just depends on what fits you. But this is where I see people get surprised. They start their search focused on the house itself without realizing how much the surrounding area is going to shape their routine. And once we start narrowing things down by county and general area, things usually start to click a lot faster because now the search has structure. Another thing that catches people off guard pretty quickly is how much the actual homes change depending on where you are in the Richmond metro. And I don't just mean price. I mean the style, the layout, the age of the home, and even how the neighborhood itself feels. Because Richmond didn't grow all at once. It developed in phases over time, and you can really see that depending on where you look. In some parts of the metro, you'll find older homes with more established surroundings, richer trees, unique layouts, homes that don't all look the same, and neighborhoods that have kind of evolved naturally over time. In other areas, you'll see homes built in the 80s and the 90s. These tend to have more traditional floor plans, a little more separation between rooms, and neighborhoods that feel very settled and consistent. There are parts of the Richmond metro where you can step outside of those neighborhood structures completely and find homes on larger lots, custom builds, or properties with a lot more distance between you and your neighbors. So when someone says, I'm moving to Richmond, what they don't always realize yet is they're also choosing between very different types of homes depending on where they focus their search. And this is where expectations start to shift, because then there are the little things, the details that don't always show up online, but people notice right away once they start touring homes here. For example, basements. Depending on where you're coming from, you might expect every home to have one. But in the Richmond area, that's not always the case. Another one is garages. You'll find plenty of homes with garages, but how they're used can be a little different than what some people expect. A lot of homeowners here use their garage more for storage or an exercise facility than for actually parking their cars. So when you're touring homes, you might walk into a garage and realize it's functioning more like extra storage space than a place to park. But these are the kinds of things relocation buyers bring up all the time once they start seeing homes in person, because they're not always obvious when you're just scrolling online. And once you're aware of them, it makes the process feel a lot smoother. This is probably one of the most important things to think about and one of the most overlooked. What does your actual day-to-day life look like once you're living here? Because the Richmond metro overall is very manageable. Getting around is relatively easy compared to a lot of larger cities, but your daily routine can still feel completely different depending on where you lay it. In some areas, everything feels very close and efficient. In other parts of the metro, things are a little more spread out. And then there's another layer people don't always think about at first: what your weekends start to look like. In some parts of the Richmond metro, it's very normal for your routine to include things like stopping by a local farmer's market, walking through a small town main street, or running into seasonal events that just kind of become part of the year. In other areas, your weekends might revolve more around heading into different parts of the metro, trying new restaurants, meeting friends, or exploring different spots depending on what you're in the mood for. And neither one is better, but it's just different. And this is where I always encourage people to pause and really think through their routine. Not just, do I like this house, but how does my life actually function here? Here's something most people don't realize until they're already here. You can drive 10 to 15 minutes in the Richmond metro and be in completely different localities without it feeling like you've gone anywhere major. But behind the scenes, a lot just changed. And this is where things get important. Because across the Richmond metro, you're not just dealing with one city or one county. You're looking at multiple localities, each with their own way of operating. And what that could affect is things like property taxes, how areas are developed, how services are structured, how growth is happening. Now, you don't need to memorize all of that, but you do want to be aware of it, because two homes that feel very similar on a tour day can come with different long-term considerations, depending on where they're located. And this is one of those things that doesn't always show up in a listing. It's something you understand once you start looking at the metro as a whole. When people ask about commuting in the Richmond metro, the first thing they usually want to know is how long is it going to take me to get places? And the honest answer is, most of the time, it's pretty reasonable. Here, your commute isn't just about how long it takes. It's about how you get there. And that can feel very different depending on where you live. In some parts of the metro, your drive might feel very direct. You're getting on a main road, maybe a highway, and it's a pretty straightforward route from point A to point B. In other areas, your commute might involve more local roads, a few turns, stoplights, maybe a route that feels a little less predictable, depending on the time of day. And then there are places where everything looks close on the map, but the way the roads are laid out makes the drive feel a little longer than you expected. That's something people don't always catch right away when they're just looking online, because distance and drive time don't always line up the way you think they will. And this is where I see people make adjustments. They'll find a home they really like, and on paper, the commute looks fine. But once they actually drive it during the times they'd normally be on the road, it either works perfectly or they realize it doesn't quite fit their routine the way that they thought. And as a native Richmonder, this is one of the biggest things I encourage people to do early in the process. Test the drive. Once people start narrowing down where they want to live in the Richmond metro, the next surprise usually comes when they actually start looking at homes, because the market here doesn't always behave the way people expect it to. The buyers who tend to have the smoothest experience here are the ones who come in with a clear understanding of what they're looking for. Not just the house, but the area, the setup, and what matters most to them. And this is actually something I spend a lot of time on with my relocation clients. Before we start to seriously looking at the homes, I focus on helping them get familiar with the different parts of the Richmond metro. Sometimes that looks like mapping out different areas for them to explore during their first visit, so they can experience the neighborhoods, the drive times, and just how each area feels in real life. Because once that part clicks, everything else moves a lot faster. If you step back and look at everything we've talked about, the way the metro is set up, the different types of homes, how daily life actually functions, and how manageable it is to get around, it starts to make sense why so many people are choosing to move here. Because the Richmond metro sits at a really unique position. You've got options. You can live closer in and stay connected to everything. You can move out a bit and get more space and convenience. Or you can go even farther and create a quieter, more private setup without feeling completely disconnected. And that kind of flexibility is hard to find. But there's another layer people don't always think about right away: opportunity. Because the Richmond metro has a wide mix of industries: corporate offices, healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, education, and those jobs aren't all in one place. They're spread across the region. And what that does is give people more flexibility. You're not locked into living in one specific pocket just to be near work. You've got options in how you structure your commute, your home search, and your day-to-day routine. And that ties right back into what makes this area work so well. It's not just that there are things to do. It's that the whole system feels livable day to day. Getting around is manageable. Running errands doesn't take over your whole day. You've got access to what you need without feeling overwhelmed by it. And over time, that starts to matter more than people expect. Because a lot of the buyers I work with are coming from places where life started to feel a little too busy, a little too expensive, or just harder to manage. And what they're really looking for is balance. And that's what Richmond does well. It gives you different ways to live without forcing you into just one version of it. So you're thinking about making a move to the Richmond metro and you're trying to figure out which part of the area actually fits your life? That's exactly what I help people work through every day. Not just finding a house, but helping you understand how the different parts of the metro function, so you can make a decision that actually feels right once you're living here. If you have questions or you're starting to plan a move, feel free to reach out. Call, text, email, or grab a time on my calendar. All of my contact information is in the description below.